Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us tmosso at the1916company.com for purchase, pricing, and availability questions concerning this watch. And this watch is a rarity. You're looking at a stainless steel Patek Philippe 1463 chronograph, part of a model line generally considered to have been produced from 1940 to 1965, though examples continue to be sold for at least half a decade longer. With maybe 750 produced, it's important to recognize that about 10% were steel, likely a maximum of 75 watches. About 100 featured Breguet numerals. And if you want to combine the steel case with the Breguet numerals, total production likely around 24 watches at most. There are other elements that winnow the potential number of watches identical to this one, including, if you look very carefully, the fact that the outer track, the tachymeter, is of a second tone. That's not tarnish, that's not corrosion. This is what's sometimes known as a two-tone dial. It has nothing to do with gold or metal. It has to do with that outer track being a darker shade. And then you can see, because this is a US market watch, and we'll discuss a little bit more why in a moment, you'll appreciate it has a less common mile calibrated tachymeter scale. That's usually a kilometer calibrated tachymeter scale. So the watch is not large, although it's also not small by the standards of its day, and particularly by the standards of prior Patek Philippe chronographs using the caliber 13-130. This watch is 35 in diameter. It's 13.5 millimeters thick thanks to the dramatic bubble-like profile of the plexiglass, and then from lug tip to lug tip, 42.8 millimeters with an 18 millimeter spacing between the lugs. This model line was Patek Philippe's first water-resistant chronograph, and while it has no water resistance today, that's just common sense with any vintage watch, in its day, it was considered to be quite a technical triumph. It still looks good on the wrist. Due to its size, the steel watch has roughly the wrist presence of a modern-day 36mm Datejust on a strap. Now you can see my wrist is 16 centimeters circumference, and this is a really nice-looking watch on every level. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's also a watch that's unisex viable in this day and age, as a man or a woman can wear this thing and be the absolute boss. And you will be the absolute boss wearing this watch. Taking a look down the barrel, it looks bigger than it is, or my wrist looks smaller because the strap is new and it hasn't broken in. Back then, it's funny to see strap tool holes on a Patek Philippe case, but there was an expectation that people might change their own straps on a regular basis. Rolling around to the other side, taking a quick look, the famed tasti tondi, or round buttons with their turbine-like outer profile, and of course this watch is a product of its time. The crown is very large in diameter, narrow in profile, and unbranded. The bezel is minimalist, stepped, and very shallow with a conical profile. It thins out the watch visually. The dial is lush and lovely. As you can see, it's a very clean dial. Clearly, it's been handled historically, but not roughly handled. It has held up well given its age. And you may be wondering, what is its age? Well, this watch right here has a movement number of 868199. Let's put that in perspective. Documented previous examples of the watches that have gone to market via auction, we had 867658 confirmed by Patek to have been made in 1949, 867932 confirmed to have been made in 1950, and 869000 confirmed to have been made in 1958. So this is 868199. And on the reverse, we have a little bit more documentation. We have Ari Mason Jr. receiving this watch for Christmas 1954 from Mom and Dad. I wish I had Christmases like that when I was a little kid. I'm still waiting for my Patek Philippe stocking stuffer. You can see the unique caseback. So water resistant and faceted. It is a screw-in caseback. And so this watch would have been made with a case by Taubert at the time, but Francois Bourgel is traditionally cited as the manufacturer. Bourgel was bought out by Taubert, I believe, in the 1920s, but the cases continued to be signed FB. Bourgel was a historic water-resistant case maker with patents on water resistance features going back as far as the late 19th century. So this is a FB by Taubert case, if you will, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. The watch does have that wonderful combination of exclusive features being steel, Breguet numeral, two-tone dial, mile rather than kilometer, calibrated tachymeter scale. Simple survival and condition at this point in its history also make it somewhat unique. But let's take a closer look at the other calling card of a U.S. market watch. Now, the thing about the U.S. market watches is historically they were stamped with two different movement codes. Imported watches during the middle of the 20th century would tend to have movement codes that corresponded to their manufacturers. Now we're going to look at the movement here, which is based on the Valjoux 23, a movement that traces its roots to the second decade of the 20th century. And here it is, a substantially improved, decorated, mechanically upgraded, doing business as the Patek Philippe 13130. It has a diameter between 29 and 30 millimeters, so it's a fairly large movement. But before I talk about tech specs or the finish or the condition, let's just jump back to that whole notion of the movement being U.S. market. See where it says HOX? So Patek Philippe watches built for the American market would have been stamped with the import code PXP or HOX. And you'll also see HOX on certain Universal Genève watches imported during the period because the Henri Stern Watch Company, the U.S. branch of Patek Philippe, was the importer of record for both of those. So HOX is not PXP, but both PXP and HOX are correct Patek Philippe import codes. One thing that's interesting here is that due to the price point of a Patek Philippe even then, there was no thought to sending over a knockdown kit for U.S. casing and timing. So it has a high jewel count, 23, that would have subjected it to onerous taxes. It was cased and timed in Switzerland, which is why, among other things, you will see that this is quite clearly a Swiss-made case. So it was easier to use both hands to demonstrate at close range on camera. But you can see FB, Francois Bourgel. There is a little maker's mark. Then you can see it is patented because it's water resistant. It's made of stainless steel. You can see the reference is 1463 along with the case number. Don't confuse that with the movement number. The movement number is what you go by for aging it. But this being a Swiss-made case, you can tell along with the jeweling and the adjustment, which is 6 positions plus temperature on this watch. They were not worried about the U.S. import tariffs because the guy buying this watch simply did not care. I should also mention that part of the case construction included a snap-in dust cover to add additional resilience against contamination. Now, jumping back to the movement, as I mentioned, it's fairly large, and it's manual wind with a 42-hour power reserve, 23 joules, 6-position adjustment, plus to temperatures. You could see it features a blued overcoil hairspring for concentric breathing in every position. We do have a delightful column wheel, which in traditional Geneva fashion is polished and capped, and lateral clutch action, which is light and delightful. You could see the adjustment mechanism and the tension spring, beautiful. Take a look at the cap to the escape wheel, which has been interior beveled and mirror polished on its top. The Geneva waves across the bridges, the satination on the steel chronograph components, with the polishing on their flanks. Black polished swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism with a screw-fixed micrometric device. A really awesome Patek Philippe movement with Valjoux roots that was used by Patek from the 1930s through the 1980s and the end of Valjoux-based Patek chronographs and perpetual calendar chronographs to be replaced by Lemania 2310s until the early 2000s. So this is a truly beautiful movement. You can see the serial number right there to validate the approximate aging that I've presented. A beautiful watch in outstanding running condition and an awesome and rare timepiece, the likes of which probably exist in no fewer than 15 to 20 examples surviving in the world today. So if you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details. And one last note, look at that interior bevel on the chronograph bridge. This was a movement that was finished for the eyes of watchmakers only, not the owner, and yet the decoration, the ultimate sign of integrity. Fine finish where no one will see it. Again, reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.